Diamond, Diamond.
A precious gem of the most valuable kind. When pure, it is clear.
Diamond, Diamond.
A family name bringing traditions of love, hard work, and moral values.
This is the Diamond Education Podcast with my mom and dad, Jon and Kellee, England.
Welcome to the Diamond Education Podcast with their hosts, Jon and Kellee, England. We're excited today to have Kim Goetz with us on our podcast. Kim Goetz is the Executive Director of the Canyon Groves Academy in Pleasant Grove, Utah. She was born in Brisbane, Australia, but has lived more than half her life in the States. She has created and then ran the Canyon Groves Distance Learning Program shortly after she became the Executive Director of the school. Kim is the mother of 7 children, including 2 sets of twins and 7 grandchildren. We are excited to have you on the podcast, Kim. Welcome.
Thank you. It's fun to be here.
So why don't you just take a moment and just tell the audience a little bit more about you and your background and why education is just so important to you.
Oh, wow. Okay, so I think education is important to me because I didn't have one. So to me, I grew up very, very poor, and I didn't have an official education. So if you're using that word in the official sense, the piece of paper sense, I never had one. I left school at 8th grade. I was offered a job. My family needed the income. And so I didn't ever have an official education.
Wow.
Obviously, I spent a lot of my life learning, and I'm a big avid learner, but an official education was never anything that I had. So I think because of that, sometimes when you lack something, you really appreciate it. So I always appreciate the opportunity to learn. And I always want my kids, whether they're my own, 7's my lucky number. I have 7 kids, 7 grandkids, and 700 students. And so it's all the 7s.
Yeah.
So yeah, whether it's my 7 kids or my 700 kids, I just want them all to have the opportunity to learn and to continue learning. So yeah, it's very important to me.
That's awesome.
I love that, Kim.
I like to make a distinction sometimes for people that you didn't have formal schooling, but you definitely had education, right?
Mhm.
There were definitely learning opportunities along the way. And I would definitely call you, even though you say that you don't have you didn't have a formal education, a very educated person, right? And
and I would absolutely agree with that. But I think the thing that a piece of paper education does for you is it gives you a foundation. I think for me, because I didn't have that piece of paper education, I always felt like I had the imposter syndrome because I didn't really have that piece of paper foundation. You know, you're here, you've arrived, here's something that says you've arrived. I didn't ever have that. And so having the lack of that, I think, has affected me, and not negatively. I don't think it's negative effect. It's just made my journeys different.
Yeah. So Jon had the chance to tour Canyon Grove with you this week. He was impressed. He came home and was telling me about it. Kim, what makes Canyon Grove, I want to ask you, different from a traditional school?
Oh, wow. So what makes us the same as a different school would be a quicker question. We are different. I think our focus is different because we focus on the entirety of the child. And for us, it's not just about learning math and learning language arts, learning science. It's just so many, many things. And we focus on the family, I think, so much more too. And we feel like we're in partnership with the family. The majority of our kids only come on campus 1 to 1.5 days a week. And so because of that, education isn't just an experience between the student and the teacher. It's an experience between the family, the student, and the teacher. So it's a totally different way of doing things.
So follow-up I have. So how are the families involved at your school?
Well, they're involved at home more than at the school. And I think that's where we meet them. We meet them where they're at. They're at their home. That's where we meet them. And so for us, it's more of a, the school picks our favorite curriculum, and we evaluate a lot of curriculum to make sure it's doing what the state needs us to be doing, which is following standards. But the majority of the curriculum we use is things that homeschool families would utilize anyway. And so we allow our parents, and that's a crazy way for even me to catch myself saying it. We allow our parents to have choice. That's kind of ridiculous. But we do. We really promote that choice in the home and help the parents make those choices that are right for their student. I mean, we would look at the students and say, well, here you've got Susie, she learns this way. Here you've got Johnny, we can see that Johnny needs more of this. Well, here's the curriculum choice that might work for Susie, and here's one that might work for Johnny, and here's how you put all those pieces together. And so we're in a creation partnership together. So when we talk about individualized education, which is such a nice buzzword, we genuinely believe in that, and we genuinely think we have the ability to do that because we have the partnership with the parents. I think in the classroom that's kind of a bit tough, but with that partnership, that's what we're able to do.
Yeah, one of the things I loved when I came and visited your school is your school library actually really impressed me, because yes, there's books there, but what I really loved was just the rows and rows of topic driven packets that, like, with books and materials that were available for you to just hand to parents. I mean, like you said, the children for the most part only come 1, maybe 2 days a week, or a day and a half every week, which means that a lot of their learning is happening at home, and you're providing those options for parents that are like, hey, I need something to help them with math or with learning about dinosaurs or whatever it is, and they can just take it and go. I was super impressed with that. How did that come about as part of your school model?
I think I created this school model based on my needs. I started as a homeschool mom. I started doing that over 30 years ago, so it's been a long, long time. And one of my needs as a parent was the fact that, one of my kids had come to me with an interest in, let's pick dinosaurs, and you went to dinosaurs and say, hey, Mom, I'm really interested in dinosaurs. Okay, let's learn about dinosaurs. So, I would jump on and I would start learning about dinosaurs. Maybe I'd order some books from Amazon, and maybe I'd order some supplies and stuff. And by the time I kind of gathered myself and all my resources together in order to teach dinosaurs, well, he wasn't interested in dinosaurs anymore. He'd moved on to the next topic, right? So for me, it was, as a mom, I needed just a quick grab and go resource. I wanted something to see, something to touch, something to do in those resources so that I could grab my child when they were at that interest and not a week when they had been past it. And so that was the main need for me. And it was also the fact that, resources cost a lot of money. And I wanted to be able to provide as many tools as possible to our families to be able to support their education and whatever that is. I mean, that resource library has microscopes, telescopes, engineering kits. And like you said, it has all the math games and all those different pieces as well. But you want to learn to crochet, you want to learn to sew, it's all there in the resource library in ready to go kits. And I think that's really important. Mums are busy. We want to educate our kids, but we're busy. We need it to be as efficient as possible.
One of the things I also loved about your school was the vast amount of garden spaces and the farm animals that you have on there. So tell us why this experiential learning is so important for you and your students, for your school and your students.
That's a good question too. So the garden started with COVID. And so what happened was, all the kids left, all the staff left, everybody was gone. And that March, I sat here in the building and where I'm at today and looked out my window, and I was paying people to mow the grass and paying to water the grass and all those crazy things that we all do. But I looked out the window and just felt the need to create a safe space for our children. And to me, that's one of the favorite things that people say when they drive into our school is, wow, you can feel that bubble. You can feel that bubble when you enter, because it's farm, it's plants, it's gardens, it's animals everywhere, and they bring such a safe feeling for the kids. And so it's that. And then to go along with that safety thing was the, 2 different really influential experiences that we had that first year. We had the farm, which is one of the little girls, her dad died that year. And our farm cat would meet her at the front of the school every day. Awesome. And they would sit in the snow and snuggle until she was ready to come inside. And that we could not, we all tried to help and support that little girl, and we all did our very best, but it was the farm cat that really touched her heart in a way that none of us could. So that was amazing. And then our second experience that first year was the fact we had another little girl who really struggled to connect with anybody, but she connected with the farm turkey.
That's
Oh,
awesome.
Right. And I remember the first day she said, Mrs. Goetz, come and see this. And she took me to the turkey and she sat down beside the turkey and rubbed noses to beaks. And I was like, whoa, it's a turkey. But she connected with that turkey, and that turkey loved her back as much as she loved the turkey. And whenever she was having a hard moment, we'd go, let's go visit Herc the Turk. And we would, and she felt better. And you could just see the improvements in her because of that relationship and that safe connection that she was able to make. So that's where it started, but it's blossomed and grown since then. I mean, kids have lost that connection with food, and adults too.
Yeah.
The first time I have all sorts of chickens because I wanted to introduce diversity. I wanted them to know, but it was the staff who said, what? Chickens aren't just white, eggs aren't just white. And just to learn those things and have those experiences of being outside in it is just, it touches people's hearts in a way that I don't know that we can.
Yeah.
So it's big. It's a lot bigger than
awesome.
even just that, but it's,
Yeah.
Well, and me as a former educator, I can see like all these different things. I mean, kindergarten, they learn about the life cycle. Well, what better way to learn about the life cycle than, hey, we're planting this in April or May.
Right.
When you come back in August, September, it's going to be like this. And they can walk through these seeds that they helped plant, or things like that. Or, hey, the bunny just had babies. Let's watch them grow as they turn into adults, and how do they change? Like, it gives them this real, like, experiential, I think, experience that most schools just don't have. In fact, I would say almost every school lacks something like that. So
yeah, and rightfully so. It's a lot of work.
yeah.
It's just so much work. It is so much work, but I'm so committed to the work because of those things that you're saying. And and I'll go back, you're seeing it from the scientific, and I respect that, but I'll go back to the emotional part of, I want kids, we have a planter box for each class now, and we have gardens on one side that I have and my staff have done so they can see what a successful garden looks like. But I want them to have their own planter boxes, which they do this year. I want them to try planting a tomato in October and just see what happens, right?
Yeah.
I want them to experience failure leads to success. Okay, that didn't work, planting it in October. What should we try next? And so it's all those kinds of things too. So yes, the learning outside is so unlimited, and it sticks. It sticks. They get it when they're touching it and they're part of it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, there are, like you said, different learners. So I just noticed with my kids, some learn differently. Some can listen, some it's visual, some it's moving around.
Yeah.
So
For sure. Well, I was really grateful one day when my one of my mama goats decided to give birth just at pickup time. And so our moms would pick up their kids, drive around, and then park. And I had all these mums lined up outside the goat pen talking their child through this experience. And I'm like, wow, okay, I'm pleased it was at pickup time and not at drop up time.
Yeah.
But just those kinds of things too. And the first time an animal died, I was like, oh my gosh, am I going to hear back from all these mums that, my child is traumatized? But we didn't. It was just, it's part of the life cycle and part of their understanding of, this is hard, but it's okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Sorry, I get going on the farm.
No, I love
it's
it.
great.
Well,
It's
I love
awesome.
too, even the death part, because then the family where you are, they're at the school part-time, but like that they can go home and process that with the family as
I
well.
agree. And that's one of the other things I love about part-time too. And I'm going to get a little off topic for what you're asking me, but
that's okay.
No.
I had 5th grade girls at one time, and 5th grade girls have a tendency to struggle emotionally with each other, right? There's all those relationships as they're growing up and having maturity. And I really loved the fact that my girls could come on campus one day a week and struggle with peers. And then we had the rest of the week to discuss it, to process it, to formulate a plan, to go back and try again, and then struggle, and then do it all over again. And I love that. And I always felt like if they were in 5 days a week, we would never really have time to process that and work through it. But just the one day a week, it became an addition to the learning experience, right? Having that struggle on the day. So we get hit by the state every year, dinged by the state, because we don't have bullying. And they're always like, you cannot not have bullying. I'm like, well, actually we can. And but I really believe it's because it's the 1 day a week. The kids
Yeah.
just have time and they're not together enough to bully. So anyway, like
Well,
I
and
said,
I
hot
think
topic, but
also your model with the distance learning and the families being involved, but also the vast variety of ways that people can learn on your campus, it gives all of them an opportunity to be successful. I mean, you mentioned the girl with the turkey. I mean, she probably hadn't felt successful at school, but all of a sudden she's connected with this turkey, and that's
yeah.
a success that she's having at school that everybody can see,
Mhm.
you know, as opposed to, oh, I only have that at home, but at school, maybe I just, school's not for me because I'm not a good reader or I don't do math well or whatever, right? But she has
Yes.
this emotion, like you said, emotional connection with this turkey that is a success story that she has in the learning environment of school.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
so
she was the
I love
only
all that.
one that Herc would rub beaks noses to beaks with. So absolutely. That
Yeah.
was her private success. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was
Yeah.
really good.
Absolutely. That's
Yeah.
way cool.
So Kim, another question. Canyon Grove blazed the way for a different funding model for school. Tell us what learner validated attendance is and how that is different from traditional attendance.
Okay, well, I was really grateful for this policy that came to be and the fact that we can now have learner validated attendance. And it's really based on competencies. And so it starts with that whole policy that came about too, is that, and I think Utah is really, you know, leaps and bounds ahead of some other states as far as this is
Yeah.
concerned. And so everything's based on, can the child show that they're competent in a particular area, which I think is how it should be. But then the learner validated attendance is in addition to that. So instead of the, you know, the 180, 990 hours, instead of the seat time, we've structured it that they can show their time in many other ways. And so, as you've already stated, they're only on campus a day and a half. So how do we show their attendance the other days? Because it still has to be 180 days, 990 hours. So learner validated, there's 3 different ways. They can validate their student learning, which is they can show that they've done a project, or they can show that they have a portfolio. And so it's showing their learning in some way. So that's one way. And then the other way is participation. So obviously participation shows up on the day they come on campus, but it can also show up online if they're doing some kind of online thing or something that way. And so it shows up that way as well. So you've got the student learning, which is always my favorite. And then you've got the participation. And then the other one is simply communication. Are they communicating? Are they communicating with the school? Can we see them? Can we hear them? Do we know that they're out there? Did they know that we're here for them as well? And so it's really those 3 things. There's another one that's duration and all that, but I don't think that matters as much as those 3 things. And I love that we can have learner validated attendance. It makes so much more sense to me.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I think it does too. I just had dinner with my sister last night, and you know, her son is in high school, and he has to stay home with his grandpa, who is losing his memory because grandma's in the hospital. My sister's staying with grandma at the hospital, and
Oh,
dad
wow.
has to go work to make money, right?
Right.
And so like, hey, I need you to stay home. And so he's missed like 3 weeks of school attendance, but I mean, he's staying up with his classes, but he's not physically at the school.
Yeah.
And so it's just like this option to create attendance or whatever, like different than the traditional model. I love that, because I think it gives you guys a lot of flexibility in a school too.
Yeah, it sure does. And you and I both know, right? Some kids are in attendance, their butts are in that seat, but the lights are out. They're not at home, you know, they're in attendance, but they're not really participating. And so I think it goes that way as well. And it really shows that, okay, this kid is learning and this is the way how. So yeah.
Kelly had a great term for this that she shared with me, which is the kids are truant in the mind, right?
Yeah.
They're physically at school, but their minds are elsewhere, you know, and that's not a great model for learning either. So
heavens no. Yeah, I agree. I love that, Kelly. That's great.
Well, and just your story too, you know, of, I think sometimes when we're forced to do things, you know, we don't appreciate it, you know, but when we get to explore and learn and, you know, and go after our interests or what, you know,
Yeah, for sure. It changes it,
you
doesn't it?
take a more of an ownership of your education,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so
Well, even as an adult, I hate being forced into a box. I hate sitting at seminars and just being told this is what you're going to learn today. I mean, that's just like, that is not my thing. And I do not learn very well that way. So I can truly appreciate all the different ways that we can learn and be engaged, and then we can provide. And that's me as an adult. Then, I'm very self-disciplined. How about Johnny, who's 6 and who can't figure out how to sit still? Well, why should he? Learning, can happen when you're moving. So it's just,
well, even we did a little test with my one daughter who's 16, and she's a kinesthetic learner, and just this week I'm like, how about you do this while we're doing history?
Yes.
And it was amazing because before she told me she hated history.
Yes.
Like she wasn't interested. But now while she's doing this thing, she's engaged and she's enjoying it. Like, it's like, why do we need to make them sit?
Sit still and have their hands still. Why can't they be knitting or crocheting or doing something? It doesn't really matter.
Or shorter amounts of time, let
That
them.
too.
So anyway, it doesn't have to look one way. So.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
So you've shared a little bit about how you individualize education, and I'm just curious, kind of what are some of the successes that you've seen with your model in educating children? What are some of the you've mentioned some of the emotional successes. I'm wondering about if you can share maybe some stories from, because people send their kids to school for academics too, right? So what are some of those academic successes?
For sure. We love academics too. That's all about empowering kids. So we love academics too. So I think COVID was the perfect showcase for us in helping everybody, not just us, to see what our model could really do. And during COVID, while the rest of the nation, maybe even the world, right, their grade levels really just plummeted. And we're starting to see that with NAEP testing results. I don't know if you've looked at those. And how everything's just, everybody struggled across the board. Everybody struggled. The most amazing schools just kind of leveled out. And just, we did this and we just skyrocketed. And so when you look at, across the board, all of our areas grew, but the area that grew the most that we were so excited about was our early literacy scores. And the state average for early literacy is 60%. And prior to COVID, we barely scraped into that 60% category. But during COVID, after COVID, when we tested, we jumped up to 77%. So we jumped 17% with our growth in our early proficiency, which was astounding to even us. I mean, you should have seen us celebrating. And it's just, the state asked me, how did we do that? And my response was, well, one, we know what we've been doing. We've been doing this for a while now. And so this is not new to us. We understand this model. So everybody else is kind of floundering. We're doing okay. But beyond that, it's really parents. Our parents chose to do this. Our parents are fully engaged with their students, and they quite frankly know what they're doing too. And that's what gave us those huge jumps. And so that was pretty dang exciting.
That's awesome. Wow, cute.
That's
I know, right?
One of the things that I actually loved too about when I visited your school earlier this week was that you mentioned that some of the parents come, and maybe they're like a plumber or an electrician or whatever, and they look at your school and they say things like, I wish this were my school growing up because I would have fit in, right? And so I think just your model itself seems to lend itself to, like Kellee said, maybe a kinesthetic learner or the kids that don't want to sit 5 days a week, 6 hours a day, every day. I mean, I do look at like a 6-year-old and asking them to sit for how long. That's a long time for a 6-year-old to sit still and not get up and move and dance or play basketball or whatever. So sorry, no question there. That was just a long diatribe by me, but
no, that's fine. No, and obviously I totally agree with you. I mean, I love our families, and I love the color that they bring to our table. I mean, homeschooling families, we're very opinionated. And I love that. I mean, our families will come to me with that trepidation of, is my child going to be safe in this school? Are you going to teach my children things that I don't want you to be teaching my children. And, you know, the topics now that are the hard topics are the gender topics and the critical race theory topics. And it's, you know, no, we have your kids one day a week. We're not going to teach them. We're going to stay right away from all of those topics, because it really is back to the parents and really honoring the parents and honoring them to be able to teach the kids what they want to teach the kids.
And I love that. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. And studies show that the kids who succeed are the ones that the families are involved and in charge. So
without a doubt. Every single study shows that. Yeah.
And so if that becomes like a family value for them, you know, the parents can teach that, and just you as the school, like, hey, we're focusing on these things. Absolutely. And the parents know that coming in.
Absolutely. There are certain topics we always say, there are certain topics we always say, well, that's controversial at this point in time. So you choose to teach those things at home. We will stick to these main topics here and stay clear from the things that families are concerned about.
Well, and I love even like God's hand almost in the goat having the baby at the end of the day, right?
I know, right? Don't you love that?
Because it's like, that can be controversial, right? Like, but it's like, God was like, let's do this. And then it can go home to the family.
That's exactly it. Exactly.
I do have a question to follow up, Kim, too, because it just stood out to me, because you said earlier about you weren't educated in the paper sense, right? Which, if people in the box look at that, right, they're like, why is she in charge of a school, right? Like, but you obviously have had 7 successful children, you know, and you were educated, but just not in the, you know, the paper, you know. It's so interesting because a lot of parents, I think, would like to homeschool or do other options, but they're scared or nervous or don't know what to do. And I even had a mom being, you know, like, Kellee, I don't know how you can do it. I can't do it, you know. And I almost want to be like, just look at the Utah scores. You can do better than, because COVID, there was like 20% on some of the, you know, the schools. I'm like, you're smarter than the 20 per, you know, like, anyway, but.
Well, and that's why I like to share that story, is because I want people to know exactly what you're saying, Kellee, is you don't have to have a degree. You don't have to have all these things, you know, as long as you're continually learning yourself. And you have that love and passion for learning, that's what the child picks up. You know, they can go to Google and ask questions. If you light that passion and that fire with them and the ability and desire to learn, they're going to go find the learning.
Exactly. Well, and that's really what our divine it's our potential, you know, is to just learn. So it's lighting that fire. So
and
I would say even I mean, since we went to the spiritual realm of, like, you know, as I read the scriptures too, the dictates, you know, as I read through the scriptures, is that parents are in charge of their children's education. I love that aspect of it, because I think it's just a really important point to emphasize that parents know their children best.
Nobody loves your child like you.
Exactly.
You know, and so nobody knows your child like you, and nobody understands their needs. And when we're talking about in classrooms, the first thing we need to do is build a relationship and create safety. Well, you already got that. Parents already have that. And if that's the thing that we're looking at first in a school, and you already have that as parents, you're leaps and bounds ahead.
Well, just looking, you know, and I would add, God and the parents know them best, because even that little girl with the cat, right? Like, God guided those parents to know that that's what that little girl needed, you know. So.
No, I love that. And I love that you're bringing God into the conversation. I'm so used to, as an educator, not being allowed to have God in the conversation.
We need more of that.
Skirt around it. Well, I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. I mean, we are here on earth to learn. You know, and I know one of your questions to me was, what is education? Well, you know, what isn't? You know, if you consider education, I always trade out that word for learning, because education to me means the piece of paper, and I disregard that. And it's like, well, what is learning? Well, what isn't learning? You know, I don't know about you, but I'm learning every second of every day about the world around me, the people in it, about myself and how I relate to the world around me and the people in it. And it doesn't stop, and it shouldn't stop. And I think that's really, my older children, through a series of misfortunate events, actually graduated from a high school. And my son actually didn't graduate. I didn't even know until I went to graduation ceremony that he actually wasn't graduating. I didn't understand the American system of school, so I did not know my son wasn't going to graduate, so he didn't graduate. My daughter, on the other hand, she graduated. She had a 4.0, and she said to me, Mom, I'm never going to read another book ever again. I hate reading, right? Because that's what she learned in the classroom. And my son said, I hate education. I hate learning because that's what he learned in the classroom. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. No, this has to change. We have to do it differently because life is about learning.
Yeah. And I mean, we've had the same. We just recently started homeschooling last year.
Yeah.
But same, like our 16-year-old, where she's having a paradigm shift,
Yeah.
like what learning actually looks at, where she loves science. Like Kim, she'll spend 2 hours with anatomy. Just,
I know, isn't it great?
yeah, like she loves the body and wants to, so it's just.
We actually, I instigated the beginning of a high school this year. And so we didn't ever talk about that, John, but I have Lift High, and it's lead, inspire, and then focus together. And we've got 25 high school kids that we've gathered together, and they gather here twice a week in order just to learn together and celebrate learning together and find a way to get their own self-directed learning. And I think some of that works really, really well in an environment of togetherness, especially as teens.
Yeah.
And they can learn from their peers as well. And so, totally agree.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Look up the 1828 Webster Dictionary that I read that and I was like, oh, we have education wrong. I love that definition.
Really? I will do that.
So anyway,
1828 dictionary is the way to go, right?
I know.
Yeah.
So it's changed, but and it's even more than the 1828, like you say. So
for sure.
So we have one question we always like to ask everybody at the end of our podcast. And just because we've recently become history buffs, I would say, I don't know, we're really loving history, but who is one of your heroes from history and why?
All right. I loved this question. I loved it when you asked me, and it really made me pause and ask myself the question. And I have to give you a little background. You might not realize this, but I'm not from America. So because of that, I know it's hard to tell. It's hard to know. But when I first came to America, go to a baseball game and they'd sing the national anthem. And I'm like, what are we doing? This is a baseball game. And then you'd go to church and they'd sing the national anthem. I'm like, what the heck? I'm in church. What does that have to do with the national anthem? And it would frustrate me and annoy me,
Yeah.
And so then I finally decided I need to do American history. And so I started researching and learning all about American history. And then the next July when in church we're singing it, I'm standing there singing and I'm crying because I'm like, I got it. I understand now why we sing the national anthem and why we sing the national anthem. Did you catch that?
Yeah.
Because I really get it. And so I would have to pick Lincoln. And I love Lincoln for two reasons. One, he's self-educated. Who doesn't love a self-educated person, right? I love that. And I love that. I love so many things about him. But the other thing I love about him is the fact that he did a really, really hard thing. And I look at him and I look through those lenses of, wow, where the nation was at that time. You have slavery. You have the people who are dependent upon that slavery. And the choices that he's making really impacting people's lives. And he's making the hard choices that he knows are going to impact people's lives. And I look at that and I think, I want to be that person. I want to be that person that continues to make hard choices and do hard things in the hope that they will impact not just my life, but other people's lives. So that's why I love Lincoln.
That's
Love
awesome.
that, Kim. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, Kim,
it's been so fun to
Yes.
sit and chat with you. Yeah.
So
Where can the listeners find you, Kim?
CanyonGrove.com.
Okay.
CanyonGrove.com is the website. They can find me and everything about the school that I'm doing there. LiftHigh.org is the high school that comes and is on this campus here at Canyon Grove. That's where they can find us.
Awesome. Thank you so
Kim,
much.
thank you so much for joining us.
I have loved it. So thanks for the opportunity. I sure appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Diamond Education Podcast.
You can connect with us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook
At Diamond Education, DIMOND, or on our website, diamonded.com.